You know Jones was off the deep end pulling something like that.
The story was completely twisted.
He is very much performing the stagecraft of the white savior.
Death is not a fearful thing. It's living that's treacherous. I've been running too long.
If I was here at that time, I would be a part of the People's Temple.
Hi, I'm Merle. I tend to trust in the kindness of strangers. You know, like making best friends with someone you met in the bathroom on a night out, or getting food with someone you met on a walk.
Hey, I know we just met right now, but do you want to get lunch?
I'd love to get lunch, why not?
Sweet. Merle, hi, nice to meet you. Come on, come Merle. Stranger danger, girl. My name is Joyce, and I tend to keep new people at an arm's length. You would never see me getting lunch with strangers.
As you can see in that sense, we're very different people, but we both share a very intense interest in cults. Welcome to Rise and Fall. In each episode, we're going to be investigating a different cult. Today, we're going to be visiting the People's Temple and Church. It was founded by Reverend Jim Jones, who promised his followers a utopian society in Jonestown, Guyana, which tragically led to the death of over 900 people by cyanide poisoning.
What leads people to join cults in the first place? We want to know if our different perspectives would have led us to the People's Temple, or if we peace out entirely.
How likely do you think I am to join a cult?
Merle, I love you, but I'm surprised you're not in one already.
All right, so before we get started, let's just lay a couple of ground rules. Here's what we're not going to do. We're not going to be making fun of or passing judgment on the victims or followers in these cults.
And as we go through the story, me and Merle are going to be checking in with ourselves using these little paddles.
Let's establish what a cult even is.
Merriam-Webster here says, it's a great devotion to a person, idea, object, or movement of work. One common thread with cults is that every cult needs a cult leader.
Let's talk Jim Jones. He was born May 13th, 1931 in the small town of Crete, Indiana, which at the time comprised of about 1,350 people. There was a single town hall, one blinking stoplight, and a restaurant. However, Crete did have 5 coffin makers. I'm a little confused as to the ratios there. It's just a little suspicious.
Aren't you from a small town?
I'm from a small town. We didn't have any coffin makers. Jim's father, James Thurman Jones, was a World War I veteran who lived off of disability payments after being exposed to mustard gas. He was described as emotionally absent.
Jim's mother was 17 years younger than his father and was constantly working because her husband couldn't make a living. Jones told his congregation once, "I didn't have any love given to me. I didn't know what the hell love was." Jones identified with the underdog and was motivated by this.
As a result, he did what he could to help others, bring home the less fortunate, fight off bullies, and rescue stray pets. He even wanted to be a doctor, and at 16 got a job at a hospital in Richmond, Indiana, where he met a nurse and his future wife, Marceline Boswell. I mean, so far I'm feeling okay about this, right?
I would love to find somebody, work at an animal hospital, get a little kissy-kissy by a little nursey-nursey. No red flags yet, but I'm waiting for it, guys. I feel like villains don't always start as villains, especially like villains like Thanos. They have good intentions, but somewhere along the way, it just gets really muddy.
So, should we hit the road?
Yeah, let's do this.
Let's do it. So we're on our way to the People's Temple in Los Angeles. This is a little bit about how the People's Temple was formed. Jones decided to change directions from a medical profession to a spiritual healer. By 1953, he created his own church, the People's Temple, which welcomed all ethnic groups. It seems like right now that, oh, he was just doing a good thing.
I think for me, growing up in a black church was something that was so important. I understand where Jim Jones is coming from.
I am agnostic, but I understand, even just through listening to you, why that would be appealing and why that would be nice. You can see why people would have maybe turned to him for safety and comfort and community, at that time especially.
It was so innocent from the start. Do you ever think about the influence we hold for people being influencers?
I don't even think of us as influencers, to be honest. But I guess if you look at it, you hit a certain amount of followers on social media, and then you do have an innate power and responsibility. Jones became interested in the Christian church, which in the 60s had listed the People's Temple in Indiana as a part of their denomination. He served as a pastor for them for 10 years. It was during this time that he also began to change, claiming that he could perform miracles. I'm gonna give him a hell no on this one. He also began to insist that his followers refer to him as father and refer to his wife as a mother. Daddy, no.
Hell no.
That's like trying to get into people's subconscious, kind of like mother, father, earn your trust kind of thing, I feel like.
His congregation were people who were feeling lost, who probably didn't have a good relationship with their family.
And he knew that.
In 1965, the People's Temple expanded to California. Jones progressively became unpredictable. Members of the People's Temple began to complain amongst themselves of Jones' sermons, lasting sometimes over 6 hours. His focus on sex, making members work around the clock, and leaving them exhausted with little time to spare for themselves.
I mean, I'm all about sex positivity, don't get me wrong. I'll bring sex up whenever I can. Let's put it on the table. But I have a feeling he wasn't doing it in a helpful, enlightening, empowering way.
Sex is something I don't want my pastor to be talking about for hours.
And he's having everyone call him father. Jones appeared to become increasingly drunk on power. He began to search people who entered his congregation and had guards standing around with clubs. Jones stood staunchly against the United States as a whole and would say he hated the US and the president and that he favored Hitler, Lenin, and Marxism. He began cheating on his wife, and he started telling people that he felt dirty having sex with his wife and that he would rather have intercourse with younger girls who he could more easily dominate.
It just shows his complicated, egotistic, misogynist rhetoric that made him feel like he was God. When in reality, he was a little
He would make members fight each other. Children who wet themselves were poked with electric cattle prods. There was a coffin-sized box that was kept underground where people would be placed and shouted at for their wrongdoings from someone above. While there is no specific rhyme or reason for the types of punishments that ensued, based on everything else that happened at the People's Temple, we can assume Jones chose punishments to deliberately intimidate, debase, and outright inflict pain on those who would question him.
He must have been doing some really sick things to keep people quiet about this.
People were scared. He was forcing people to confess things like incest with their children to prove their loyalty to the church, and then he would turn around and use it against them to make them stay.
I'm an LA-based writer, director, and educator. I wrote a novel in 2015 called White Knight's Black Paradise, which looks at the trajectory of African-American women in the People's Temple movement and the immigration of the movement to Jonestown in 1978. So if you look at the quote-unquote canon of work that's been done on Jonestown, the majority of them are coming from the perspectives of European Americans. And the fact was that the majority of those who comprised the People's Temple movement were African-American women. African-American folks in general were over 70%. We can't discount that folks were being served. There were rehab programs. There were educational programs. In some instances, Jim Jones would go down to courts and advocate for folks, that were coming out of the system and making these really performative overtures. African-American folks invested their property. They invested their Social Security benefits. They invested their welfare benefits. They invested other forms of equity into the church to prop up the church and provide it with the socioeconomic foundation. Jones was a very charismatic rhetorician. He would say the Bible was a site of oppression, for African Americans. He once threw the Bible from the pulpit and said the Bible was the thing that brought us. It was what they used to rip us from the rich lands of Africa and put us into chains.
As a Black woman, talking about the culture and where this place was, when I came here, I didn't expect to be in the city. I expected to be in the mountains. And it's like a neighborhood that is so Black and brown, where you see your aunts and your uncles and your family members. I can personally say, if I was here at that time, I would be a part of the People's Temple.
One of the reasons for the move to Guyana in 1978 is because a magazine article alleged abuse in the People's Temple. The new settlement in Jonestown physically and spiritually created distance between these abuse allegations and Jim Jones.
Fear was drilled into the heads of African Americans to make them complicit. If we look at the rhetoric in Jonestown itself, this is outside of the regime of racial capitalism, hierarchy, establishing the settlement where everyone will be equal, where there will be democratic rule. That was our version of racial utopia, our version of paradise. That was the outward public messaging.
I would totally go, right? a different version of society.
Yeah. I could see myself thinking that I was doing something for the greater good.
It sounds like resort vibes.
You're hearing that it's going to be this utopia where everyone's equal and everyone's happy and empowered. A new commune with a jungle backdrop was created. But it wasn't as ideal or utopian as many followers thought it would be, and things escalated from bad to worse. Before people would actually leave to Guyana, they were showing them fake staged photographs of this bounty of produce that was growing on the land. The land was essentially barren.
It's giving Firefest vibes, for sure.
Majorly.
You were sold this perfect land, and you're basically an indentured servant.
He's coming out of a social gospel, civil rights, in his mind, black nationalist and black power ethos. And he mined and exploited that rhetoric. He is very much performing the stagecraft of the white savior. Folks were working from sunup to sundown. There was very little freedom. What survivors have described is a plantation.
I think that's when people started to see the true face of Jim Jones and really started to understand that the values that they were given were not the values that they were able to really see happening in action.
The other element is white women's complicity. If we did not have this cadre of white women lieutenants, they were the major decision makers. They were writing checks, they were doing fundraising, they were out seducing politicians, specifically in Georgetown, to reel them in. They were smuggling weapons, abusing and intimidating black parishioners and other parishioners of color. They were the core of institutionalizing the Jonestown ethos.
In reality, there were many more people that look like me that were the reason people lost their lives and their families and their homes.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's like Jim Jones created a space that still perpetuated all the wrong things in our society.
Even if we wanted to nope out at this point, we couldn't leave.
People's passports were taken from them and they had nowhere to go.
I imagine that Jonestown just would become your whole world. It's all you know at that point. It's all you have.
I think that some of the common denominators for culthood are the subjugation of women, the imposition of patriarchal authority and control. Shame is a huge common denominator. Attempting to shame folks with regard to their bodily autonomy, with regard to their sexuality, with regard to their chosen identities and chosen families is a big crux of the ideology of cults and organized religions.
The three main archetypes of a cult leader typically are delusional martyr. Their beliefs are so strong that they are able to convince others to follow suit. Preacher turned egomaniac. These are charismatic people who come to learn their ability to manipulate. They typically start as a teacher or a preacher. And then the hard and fast narcissist include desire for control, unquestionable loyalty, and no tolerance for criticism.
And there's no doubt that Jim Jones was a preacher turned egomaniac. The settlement also had megaphones, so members could listen to Jones' lectures while they worked, and in the evenings they would attend mandatory propaganda classes. Plus, communication was cut off from family members and loved ones in the US. There was literally one shared radio for the entire settlement, so naturally, people back in the US with ties to Jonestown occupants became increasingly concerned and demanded that the government investigate.
I can't imagine being in this kind of a situation and you can't even speak to the people you love. I mean, imagine how isolating and terrifying that would be.
There was a lot of Orwellian spying and reporting on folks. There was drugging that transpired, with folks that were perceived to be dissenters or disruptors.
Jim Jones caught word of dissatisfaction. Jonestown became an armed camp surrounded by volunteers with guns and machetes.
Relatives of members in Guyana were becoming concerned. They got the attention of Congressman Leo J. Ryan to go and investigate Jonestown.
When defectors tried to leave with the congressman, Jones' security detail opened fire at the group as they tried to board the plane. And they shot that man, along with 14 others. Jones was off the deep end pulling something like that.
The New York Times said that it was his visit that precipitated the mass suicide.
I'm still always in awe of the level of evilness. You're taking everything from them, and then you're taking their life too.
Jones convinced people to drink Flavor Aid laced with cyanide by telling them the congressman had been killed and there was no other way out besides a revolutionary suicide. One thing that is very important to note about the Jonestown mass murder is that many of the people in Jonestown who died that day did not drink the Flavor Aid by choice. They were forced. Children and toddlers were given the drink by their parents, hesitant members were pressured, and there were armed guards surrounding the group.
So now we're going to listen to the audio recording of the last sermon from Jim Jones to his congregation before making them drink the Flavor Aid and basically killing them.
It isn't going to be easy to listen to. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
The congressman's dead. Many of our traitors are dead. They're all laying out there dead. You think they're going to allow us to get by with this? There's no way we can survive. Not worth living like this. How very much I've loved you. How very much I've tried my best to give you the good life. A handful of our people, with their lives, have made our life impossible. There's no way to detach ourselves from what's happened today. Not only are there those who have left and committed the betrayal of the century, some have stolen children from others and they're in pursuit right now to kill them.
What the hell? Is he talking about other people killing their babies as he's about to force parents to feed their children poison? And then you hear children crying in the background. You hear babies.
I don't even know, it leaves me speechless.
This next little piece we're going to listen to is Christine Miller, who was an outspoken, very brave woman who multiple times had spoken out. At one point, he even held a gun to her head, and she wouldn't back down.
I feel like as long as there's life, there's hope. That's my faith.
Well, everybody dies. Someplace that hope runs out because everybody dies.
I said I'm afraid to die.
I don't think you are.
means.
I don't think you are.
But I look at our babies and I think they deserve to live.
But to me, death is not a fearful thing. It's living this treachery. I have never seen anything like this before in my life. I've never seen people take the law and provoke us and try to purposely agitate murder of children. Christine, it's not worth living like this.
How brave is she? It literally makes me want to cry. Because I'm like,
Please don't cry, because you know I'm going to cry if you cry.
I know.
I'm going to tell you, Christine, without me, life has no meaning. I'm the best friend you'll ever have. I can detach myself. My attorney says detach myself. No. I never detached myself from any of your troubles. I've always taken your troubles right on my shoulders. And I'm not going to change that now. It's too late. I've been running too long. I'm not going to change now. Your life is precious to me. And I don't, what I do with weight and justice and judgment. And I don't think we should sit here and take any more time for our children to be endangered, because they come after our children and we give them our children, then our children will suffer forever.
What this location really evokes in the here and now is how little has changed since the Temple Movement era. We're still, as African Americans, in conditions of racial apartheid. A lot of trauma, a lot of sorrow about the loss that was inflicted upon working class to middle class African American communities at this historic site.
I have problems when this is referred to as a mass suicide, because this was not everybody's choice. Children don't have a choice. They don't know what they're drinking. They don't know what's going on. It takes too much of the responsibility off of him to call it a mass suicide.
I just feel for every single victim and their families. They were murdered. They were murdered. What I've learned throughout this whole entire episode is how it is very possible that for me, I could have been a part of it, because it had values on the surface that I believe in. And underneath that was where the lies began, and ultimately the loss of life with no choice. Can't believe you got me doing this damn show. Check out next week. We're gonna cry about a different white man.
This has been a very emotional journey, but the journey is just beginning for us. So please let us know if there are any other cults you would like us to look into.
On the next episode of Rise and Fall.
If he was allowed to keep going, people would have started dying.
NXIVM went after a lot of actors.
You're literally branding people like cattle.
What?